Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. The Twitters today had Westboro Baptist Church trending. And I'm like, nothing good ever comes out of Westboro Baptist Church trending in any way, shape, or form. So immediately I know, without even looking, that there have got to be some idiots out protesting a funeral. Because if you remember Fred Phelps and his band of lunatics, anytime there was a funeral of someone in the LGBTQ community, they showed up with their signs. And you've seen all of it. I don't want to go through the insanity of that. And so today this was trending, and I'm going, please tell me they didn't dig Fred Phelps back up to drag him to something else. Well, no, they didn't. There was a pro-Palestinian protest demonstrating outside the memorial service for former First Lady Rosalyn Carter. And you go, why? Why would you protest out in front of this woman's funeral? Why would you do this to the Carters? Understand, this is someone who has been the peace guy. This is someone who supported the two-state solution for decades. This is not the guy you protest and his wife. You just don't do that. And it shows the idiocy of some of these people. And it shows, again, what did you gain from that? Other than you getting people like me who have kind of stayed out of this issue going, what is wrong with you? And it shows the coarseness of where we are. And look, it didn't get an awful lot of attention anywhere else other than the Twitter sphere. And I think most of it was negative, going, hey, stupid, this is not the place. But it goes to show that there's either we have lost our ever-loving flippin' minds, or there's some money behind this. No decent person would do that. Look, I get the passions, I get that, but not the place. Not the place. Also today, the thing that did get the news, and this is another thing that have we lost our minds? Is no one paying attention? Evidently, Hunter Biden has said that he would be happy to come and testify before the House Oversight Committee, James Comer and his attack group, but it's going to have to be an open hearing. No behind closed doors, no smoke-filled rooms, none of that stuff. Comer losing his mind, going, no, you're going to have to, we'll see you behind closed doors. And what I find interesting is not that Comer and Republicans don't want Hunter Biden's words public, and that they want to go and be able to misrepresent anything that happens behind the closed door. Because, hey, it was behind closed doors. Who's to say what was actually said? Who's to say what really happened other than these people who have been known to, misrepresent things? Lie? Maybe you remember the last bits? And this comes at an interesting time because you've got Hunter Biden and James Biden going, look, we'll testify, but you're not going to twist our words. You're not going to do what you do. Not going to do it. Now Comer says he expects Hunter Biden to be there on the 13th for a closed door meeting. And, as I'm reading through this, I went, okay, I'll go behind closed doors when Scott Pardon Me Perry and Jim Jordan honor their subpoenas to testify, to be deposed behind closed doors. Okay, we'll trade that. Now we know Scott Pardon Me Perry and Jim Jordan, they will not. And this is the hypocrisy of this. This is how just crazy this has been. For months you've had these Republicans, Comer in particular, whining and complaining. Oh, they're not honoring subpoenas, and they've been making up all kinds of conspiracy theories that they have no proof over, none. But hey, they get to just keep throwing it out there. So Hunter Biden's like, I want to clear my name. So what did our right-wing media do today? And this, look, I understand Comer wanting to hide behind the smoke-filled backroom door and be able to make stuff up. I get that. Because this is nothing but a witch hunt in epic proportions. This is nothing but, hey, we got somebody who did something wrong. Let's pin everything on him. What I found interesting is as I was watching the F channel and the O channel and the Max channel and all of the crazy right-wing stuff, they were all defending Comer, saying this has to be behind closed doors. They were actually going, yes, we want the hearing behind closed doors. I'm going, who in media has ever said that? And it made me wonder who's writing the right-wing script right now, because all of them were on board. I did not find one right-wing commentator, tells you how in line they are, who said, no, nonsense. I want this in public. I want to see with my own two eyes that guy squirm in the seat. I want to hear his words. I want to see Jim Jordan tear him apart. I didn't see one person say that. And that's now I'm not saying no one did, but he's been quashed somewhere. But for me, it doesn't matter who. I want to see this stuff. That's the reason of having hearings, so that we, the people, can make the choice. But again, I come back to a lot of this stuff is all bread and circus. It's all American Idol and Cheetos, however you want to frame that. It's all entertainment. And it's all outrage. For instance, I got Utah Senator Mike Lee saying maybe the guy that was sentenced to 4 years in jail, this Kevin Lyons, for his activities on January 6th, maybe he wasn't a federal agent disguising as a Trump supporter. Maybe he wasn't. Because if you listen to the right wing, it's all, they're all federal agents. It's all staged. And one after another, well, we don't really have any evidence. And I love Maria Bartiromo, because sometimes she trips over asking an actual question. And again, this comes back to, on that side, you don't ask the question unless it's scripted. She asked Michigan Republican Representative Lisa McClain if, anyone had actually seen any policy changes that Joe Biden made with regards to China for the payback that they claim he got. Because the argument is that Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, the big guy, made millions of dollars, and Joe Biden changed policies specifically to get what Hunter was selling. And this McClain, said, no, the short answer is no. Because there's nothing. But they can't tell you there's nothing, because they need the outrage. They need the daily outrage. This is it. This is today's outrage. Hunter Biden won't testify behind closed doors. Find me one American who's going to go, no, I want him to testify behind closed doors. Find one outside of the right-wing outrage machine who got their marching orders today. This is me going, we're in a weird moment, folks. We are in a very strange time where it's not about truth. It's not about getting facts. It's about playing the game. It's about engaging in the outrage of the day. And the things we should be outraged at, well, we're not. I've been saying for a while, we should be fighting for things that make our lives better, and we should stop fighting over things that are nonsense. This whole thing that the Republicans have dreamt up, because this is all payback for Trump's impeachments. Understand that. This is all payback. And if you think this is ridiculous, if Trump gets reelected, oh boy, you will see ridiculous on steroids. So look at this. Pay attention what the right-wing media is spinning. This idea that, I could not believe my eyes and ears as I watched these people say, we should have this. We shouldn't get to see this stuff. It's best when it's behind closed doors because we can really get in and get to the meat and potatoes of things. We can, really? So the question I have is, do you buy it? And can you look at them with a straight face? That's what I want to know. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got a lot to get to, a lot to talk about. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Back after this. Stick around.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I got to tell you, the Pope, I like this Pope. I like him a lot. Now, granted, as a broken Catholic, I don't go anywhere near the Catholic Church anymore, but this Pope gives me hope. He's quoted saying that Christianity in America is just a money-making scheme. He's slamming, American Christians for basically turning their religion into a cash cow and an ideological circus. And it's what it's become. It really is. And look, this isn't new. You may remember back in August, the Pope said that conservative U.S. Catholics have replaced faith with ideology. It's what they believe is in the book, not what's actually there. So very, very interesting times. Let's quick go to the phones. I got Steve on line 1 from Chicago. Steve, what's on your mind, brother?
Well, a couple of things, and I do think it's interesting that this Pope would offer up that kind of commentary. And keep in mind that this is a time when in Europe and in America and many other parts of the developed world, religion is on the decline significantly. The number of people who are actually going to church differs from those who proclaim themselves as having a belief in a higher power, which obviously does nothing for the bottom line for churches.
Yep.
Okay, you believe in God, but if you're not showing up or giving, then, that doesn't do us much good. And the reality is that the Catholic Church is particularly in trouble with regard to faith because, obviously, very few people in terms of younger generations, if you're a man, is willing to embrace the idea of, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to get married, I'm not going to be able to have children, and I want to become a priest. Well, people aren't willing to make that sacrifice, and now the Catholic Church actually sees itself taking in priests who were married before they became priests, and now they're ordained as having been married, and that's fine with the Church, something that was unheard of just a few decades ago. But the Church is desperate. They have congregations without priests. So you need to sort of bend. And I tell them, I was raised, I'm a non-believer, but I was raised in the Eastern Christian faith, the Greek, Russian, Serbian Orthodox faith. And we were part of the same church until what's called the Great Schism, in which East and West, the church divided. But for us, we never prohibited priests from being married or having children. And the reason that the Catholic Church did was because, it's not like today where everything's connected and you can know with a few keystrokes exactly how much money a church took in outer Mongolia in a given week or month. So the church basically said, you know what, we don't want priests getting married because when it comes time to pass on whatever property or legacy that exists within that church, they will give it to their children and their wives. So the Catholic Church, created this nonsense that, oh no, you're married to the church, and you don't take a wife and you don't have children. It was about the bottom line the entire time, because there are a lot of Christians who are still around who never adopted that philosophy. That was just something made up out of whole cloth, and a lot of Catholics believe that it's something that originated in the original Christian church, and no, that came along much later. So that's point one. And two, you're absolutely right with regard to this whole question of why the Republicans don't want to have public hearings. I mean, you want public hearings when you have something that you could actually nail somebody on. What they want is this just to continue to be something that they can beat to death, claiming that, well, as soon as we get him up there, we'll break him and everything will be exposed and revealed and so forth. They don't have anything. They know they don't have anything.
Yeah, but even at that,
so
Steve.
Obviously.
But even at that, why not do that in public? Why this want behind closed doors? This has never been something they've ever wanted before.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, they know they don't have anything, so it's going to happen behind closed doors. And like I said, I mean, what you want is a giant campaign commercial. If you can really nail somebody, then yeah, you want the whole world to see it. So, like you said, I mean, they're all on the same page with regard to this because, for obvious reasons. If you don't have anything, then you're going to look like an idiot. Some mainstream voters are going to look out there and say, wait a minute, you people have been promising us the beef for years on this, and this is what you came up with?
You got zip.
So...
But look here,
yeah,
Steve. Steve,
mean,
I understand the politicians wanting this. I don't understand the outrage machine saying, we're okay with you hiding behind closed doors. These are people who need the daily outrage. And today's outrage was going, they refuse to do this behind closed doors. That's insane to me. That's the insane part.
Well, yeah, and let's keep in mind, I mean, depending upon who you're talking about, I mean, there's very little distinction between, the sort of right wing in this country and some things like Fox and One American News and Newsmax and so forth. I mean, so, they have to be on the same page. It's not as if, I would say, like, for instance, your show and others like it, you're not some sort of paid mouthpiece for the Democratic Party. You don't take your marching orders from them. You would never do that. But for the Republican Party, it's increasingly the case that they're just, you have to be in lockstep. You're part of the team. And if you're not interested in being part of the team, then you have no access. You're not going to get any interviews. You're not going to be part of the whole process. So you have to be, in lockstep with the party and with the party line. So, yeah, I'm not at all surprised. I mean,
and with the moneyed interest.
There are people.
Let's not forget the moneyed interest. Let's not forget the people who pay their salaries. I think I confused him. Did I lose Steve? I think I lost Steve. Well, I appreciate the call, Steve. Thanks so much. Let's move on to Jack in Wisconsin on line 2. Jack, how are we doing today, buddy? Uh-oh. Did I lose Jack too? Jack, you there? Uh-oh. That isn't good. I guess we lost Jack. No, and this is again one of these things where my mind goes to this place where you go. Remember, these are the people who they want the news, and yet it's okay. Don't worry. They'll take care of it behind closed doors. Now, the Catholic thing. I grew up Catholic. One of the reasons that we left, one of the reasons I call myself a broken Catholic, is because I grew up in poverty. We didn't have, there were months, there was no food in the house. The mice were going, hey, where's the food? And what would happen is on Monday, the church would call and say, hey, we got this envelope in the collection plate. There's no money in it. There's not a dime in the collection plate. And, we would go, hey, there's no money in the house. And they would call every Monday knowing that we were in this situation, knowing that we were struggling. And this is what they would do. And it's part of the reason that, look, I don't play into it. And that's part of the reason that we left. And it's because it's that greed factor, and I just refused to do it. Let's see who's on line 1. I got Jack in Wisconsin on line 1. Jack, how are we doing today?
Just peachy keen, except it's gone from summer to winter here in about 36 hours.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's been good. I just had a kind of an observation. The Republicans not wanting to have people listen in on these hearings. I mean, we've seen this in Wisconsin again and again, where the Republicans hold a closed-door so-called hearing, and they only invite certain people that are going to be speaking on a subject in a certain way. It's just part of their method of trying to engender, hate and fear and anger into their cultus. The latest thing in Wisconsin is they're trying to get a bill through our legislature where every library is required, every library supported by public funds is required to report to the parents what library books specifically their child is taking out of the library if they're under 16 years of age. And again, this is just a matter of they're trying to they're trying to intimidate people from checking out certain kinds of books. They're trying to limit people's information. This is very typical. My question is this, though. When do you think, because it's got to be exhausting, constantly feeling this hate and this anger and this fear, it's just got to be exhausting to their cult and to the so-called right-leaning independents. When do you think it's going to be so exhausting they're just going to say, I give up, I'm not even going to bother, I'm not going to vote for anybody that keeps on pushing this kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't see that stopping. Fear is an incredible motivator, and they're great at playing the fear card because the others are coming for your stuff, Jack. The others are coming for your children. The others, and that fear of the others is an incredible motivator. It's just scary stuff. But I appreciate the call, Jack. Thanks. Let's move along to Alice on line 3. Alice, what's on your mind here?
Well, you got phone gremlins for one thing.
Okay.
Are you still? Hello.
Go ahead. What's on your mind?
What I wanted to say was, well, what I'm thinking is, why do they want it behind closed doors? Couple of reasons. Number one, they don't want at the base to hear. I'm sure Hunter Biden's going to be in attack mode. And second of all, it's so much easier to twist things that are said when it's behind closed doors. So much easier to twist it.
Absolutely.
And exactly. And finally, what I wanted to say was, the Pope is certainly not lying about American Christianity. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Alice. Let's go back to Steve real quick with about 15 seconds. Steve, what's on your mind, buddy?
Yes, just wanted to close with this. I do think one of the other big stories today, Americans for Prosperity endorsing Nikki Haley. I do think it says a great deal about where the business interests lie in this country, and it's not with Donald Trump. It's very hard to do business in a society mired in civil war, and that's not what a lot of the big business interests in this country want.
No, I'm right there with you. Appreciate it, Steve. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Look, the Koch folks, they're all behind Haley, so it'll be interesting. There's a lot of money there. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1953. That was the day 400 photo engravers at 6 New York City newspapers walked off the job. Members of the AFL's International Photo Engravers Union had just voted down arbitration. All but one local newspaper, the New York Herald Tribune, were idled as 20,000 newspaper workers refused to cross the engravers' picket lines. 6 days into the strike, that newspaper suspended operations as well. Writers at the New Yorker magazine magazine remarked they were, quote, curled up with the Wall Street Journal, the Daily Worker, and a 2-day-old copy of Le Prince. In the decades before digital images, photo engraving was a labor-intensive process. Highly skilled workers made metal plates from which newspaper images were printed. Photo engravers had been working without a contract since the end of October. They demanded a $15 a week raise. The Newspaper Association was only willing to grant $3.75. The other newspaper unions had been offered similar wage and benefit packages far below their demands. They knew that whatever they won or lost depended on the victory of the photo engravers strike. So they walked out in solidarity. Federal mediators intervened in an attempt to settle the strike. Hysteric newspaper editors across the country shrieked that the union had accomplished what the government would never dare do: subvert the freedom of the press. They sulked that the strike had broken 35 years of industrial harmony and peace, adding that the ungrateful workers didn't appreciate just how good they had it. After 11 days, members voted to end the walkout and let a fact-finding board solve the dispute. 3 months later, the board upheld the Newspaper Association's original offer of $3.75 a week plus benefits. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Growing up, I absorbed a lot of values from my old Texas daddy. A strong commitment to the common good, a healthy work ethic, and a lively sense of humor. But one thing about him I've rejected: his determination to have a perfect yard of thick, verdant St. Augustine grass. Lord, how he worked at it, laying sod, watering, fertilizing, watering, weeding, watering, spreading pesticides, watering, mowing, more watering. But it was too hot, too dry, too infested with blight, bugs, slugs, and such. He was up against Texas nature, and he just couldn't win. So I've gone in the opposite direction, slowly nurturing a natural yard of native trees, drought-tolerant plants, and a general live-with-nature ethic in my little landscape. I'm hardly alone in this rejection of the uniform green grass imperative. A spontaneous yard rebellion is taking hold across our country as more and more households, neighborhoods, businesses, etc. shift to a nature-friendly approach. A particularly encouraging push for change is coming from school kids, elementary level through college, who are appalled by the poisoning of our globe and organizing locally to do something that both makes a difference and makes a statement. One exemplary channel for their activism is a student movement called Rewild Your Campus. Of course, some people consider wild yards to be scruffy, ugly, unruly. That's their choice, but some also insist that tidy grass lawns must be everyone's choice. So they proclaim themselves to be the yard police, demanding that cities and homeowner associations make green grass uniformity the law. They file busybody lawsuits and run right-wing social media campaigns targeting people and groups that disobey. This is Jim Hightower saying, these attacks are silly because they are silly, and also because they're attacking the future. To work for yard sanity and choice, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So one of the things I'm very happy about is in the last election, at least in my backyard, the misery maniacs for moms, you know, the Moms for Liberty group locally, they got beaten. And I got to tell you, I was sweating it out because they had some crazy ideas and some crazy thoughts on what they wanted to do with my kids' local public schools. And look, all across Pennsylvania, the Yaz money, the billionaire money didn't go very far this time. But trust me, they're not going anywhere. And here to share some thoughts on the election cycle and maybe where things are heading, I've asked Randy Wainwright to come talk with us. Randy is the president of the American Federation of Teachers, AFT. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you, Rick, and I'm so glad that the election in your backyard went very much like the elections all throughout the country. So it was a good news day this first Tuesday in November, or this election day in November.
No, but I look at this and, this gives me some hope. I got to tell you, I was a little concerned, a little down, because all you keep hearing are these attacks, the right-wing media machine. All they were talking about is the most obscene, the most outrageous stuff to get people all lathered up and all angry, so that they would go out and vote for these extreme people. And fortunately, the voters didn't allow it. So for me, it gives me a little bit of hope.
Well, I think what's happened is that there is there is a group of extremists. They're mostly, when it comes to schools, they're mostly in the right wing. I wouldn't actually even call them conservative, because what they're dedicated to is ending public education as we know it. And Rufo, you and I have spoken about this. Rufo, who's one of their acolytes, made sure that he told us, which was that in order to get to universal vouchers, which essentially means destruction of public education as an institution for all kids, you have to create universal public school distrust. And that's what these groups that these extremists like Yaz have funded, are trying to do. Yeah. And this time, as I think what has happened is, as we get farther away from COVID, even though there's still lots of issues that resulted from COVID that schools have to deal with, that parents are dealing with, that kids are dealing with, that teachers are dealing with. But as we get farther away, what you're seeing is that parents want us to be dealing with loneliness and learning loss and absenteeism and dysregulate, and the disconnectedness, and they don't want us dealing with book banning or censorship of coursework or anything that undermines the education and the opportunity that their kids should be getting. Yeah. And I think that you saw that in these elections, that even though the other side had a lot of money, Yaz, for example, put a lot of money into these extremist groups, like Moms for Liberty and others, and people came out and voted for the pro-public education candidates.
Now, again, as I said at the beginning, they're not going to stop. The money will not stop flowing, because, as you've pointed out, the goal is eventually to destroy public education, privatize and profitize Education Incorporated. And everywhere you look, there are these attacks. And you brought up absenteeism. There was an article that I saw that, that grabbed my attention, that said, look, American public schools are on their last legs. The portion of students attending a school with chronic absenteeism has doubled since pre-pandemic times. And they go through saying, teachers are looking around and nobody's in the classroom. They're painting this dire picture. Is that what you're seeing in the classroom? Is nobody showing up? Is it as bad as being painted?
No, of course not. But that's what sells papers. But what is happening is this. What COVID did do is it told a generation of kids, because of the mishandling of COVID in this country and the lack of prioritization of schooling in this country, schools were closed for an awful long time. Now, I want to actually say, as carefully as I can, that some of us from April 2020, and Rick, I was on your show a lot, you heard me say it, some of us understood that closing schools for in-person learning was a problem. And from April 2020, I tried to figure out how to reopen them, with the caveat that they had to be reopened safely, that we had to deal with the pandemic. But
you don't hear that, if I can stop you. You don't hear this when you listen to the F channel of the right wing. It's Randy Weingarten shut down all the schools.
Right. And frankly, I wish I had 1/1000th of the power they attribute to me. I would assume that I would do a far better job. But, I'm not in charge of any school system. And the school systems that I actually work with the most of them were open, far, pretty early on. Having said that, they from April 2020, we understood that we needed to reopen schools for in-person learning and do it safely to make sure that teachers and kids and their families were as safe as humanly possible. But what I'm saying is that that act, even in places that stayed closed for 3 months or 4 months, March, April, May, June, what happened is that kids lost the sense, and families lost the sense that this was absolutely imperative to go to school in person. And I think that we are suffering from that, and I think that's why you're seeing so much absenteeism. The solution for that is the solution that we should have been doing for schools all the time, which is we need to make schooling important to kids. It needs to be fun. It needs to be engaging. It needs to be relevant. It needs to be practical. Kids need to say, get up in the morning and say, that's where I want to be. And frankly, in a period of time of so much dissonance everywhere, we need to make sure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment and a well-rounded education. So the way to solve the issues of absenteeism is the way that we should be doing schooling anyway, which is making schools, public schools, places where parents want to send their kids, educators want to work, and kids are really engaged.
Yeah, but I go back to now look, it's been years since I've been in school. You didn't have a choice. There was a truant officer. There was someone who came to your house and drug you if they had to. So for me, this idea that there's an option, this to me is a struggle. I mean, because like my kids, they know that they don't have a choice. They got to get up every morning and they got to drag themselves to school, and they better learn something because this is their one shot at an education. This is their one opportunity to use this time wisely and the best that they can. And I can't understand parents who don't push that kind of a mentality.
Well, I think, I want to give a little bit of grace to parents in America right now. There's a lot of stuff, particularly in a climate of so much divisiveness and so much fear.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that's tough. But what I'm seeing more and more this year in particular is that school is center of community, and school is a place that parents and kids see as really important. 90% of kids in America still go to public schools. And, so we're seeing an increase in homeschooling. We're seeing an increase in absenteeism. We need to understand what is going on and how to address issues. That's why I keep saying, let's address the loneliness. Let's address disconnection. Let's address issues like learning loss. Let's address issues like gun violence in schools. Let's address all of these kinds of things. And frankly, when we do this, you're going to see more and more kids going to public schools, even though you're already seeing the attendance rates, or you're certainly seeing the enrollment rates tick up again.
You guys have been running this campaign, Real Solutions for Kids in Communities. And a part of that is, as I understand, making it the center of the community. When I was a kid, look, you used to go on off hours and get to play in the gym and play basketball. In the summers, when I was a kid, it was a place where you got a hot lunch before Reagan destroyed that program. It was that place where you got services and help and all kinds of things. It was that glue that held even the poorest community like I grew up in. It's what held things together. Now most schools, sadly, they lock the doors and it's like an armed camp at this point, and it's not that kind of welcoming, open place that I want it to be.
Look, I think that there's that there's lots of issues around the environment and what's happening in America right now. Every single issue ends up at the school doorstep. And what we're saying is, you know, instead of fighting about it, let's solve these problems, because schools are centers of community, and let's make sure we prepare kids for today and tomorrow. That's our obligation, and teachers should be supported in doing that work, and that's really important.
Yeah.
And we need the resources and we need the support. But that's why we're focused on, in terms of this Real Solutions campaign, what are the major issues that are challenges. Literacy is a real challenge. That's why we're giving out books to help kids become confident readers, but we're also helping teachers understand the science of reading so that they can help kids with all issues and challenges around literacy. But that's also, to your point about food security, that's why lots of states are basically saying, stop with the lunch shaming, and let's make sure we have vital breakfast and lunches for kids all the time, without question. And frankly, what we're seeing the Republicans do in the Congress is, as they're cutting the issues, they're cutting SNAP and nutrition issues, states are building it up. But that's what we're talking about community schools and wraparound services. Let's make sure it's there so we level the playing field for kids. I mean, Rosalyn Carter, her funeral was today. Think about what she did in trying to help make sure that kids have a real opportunity and a chance for success. But in addition to community schools and wraparound services and making sure we address mental health concerns and loneliness concerns and taking on the social media companies and their algorithm, the thing that I'm most excited about our campaign is this point about experiential learning and hands-on learning. Yep. In a period of time of AI and application and needing to apply knowledge and critically think and discern fact from fiction, we have to give kids the skills to do that. That's not about memorization. That's about application. So let's have more experiential learning. This is what private schools do all the time. Why are we not doing it in public schools? And let me tell you one thing. When we do this, like in career tech ed, kids come to school, they graduate on time, and they have lots of options in terms of college and career. So let's do more career tech ed. Let's do more advanced manufacturing. Let's do more healthcare work in high schools. Let's make sure we really give kids the skills and knowledge and opportunity to so they're prepared for life, for civics, for career, for college. And so as others smear and as others, basically throw obstacle after obstacle at us, what the AFT is doing and what teachers do in classrooms every single day is try to make school a place that kids want to be and a place that's compelling and interesting and where we help create opportunity.
There you go. I got to get your thoughts on this Pioneer Institute, push that they're making. And again, the Pioneer Institute, one of these right-wing free market think tanks, whose solution to everything is privatize and profitize. But they're out running around asking the question, why are public schools quashing civics and history? Are you guys doing that? Are you deliberately saying we're not going to teach kids civics and history? Because according to them, only fewer than half of the people can name the three branches of government. A quarter of the people can't name any branch of government. They've got some statistics that are fairly frightening. Are you the guys who are quashing civics and history?
You mean, Rick, you're saying that to a social studies teacher who loves teaching civics and history? Let me actually answer it this way. No Child Left Behind, by creating an accountability system that was fixated on test scores in math and in English, was when we started seeing civics being squeezed out of the curriculum. And if you have, as we've had with all of these fights around censorship and whether or not you can teach current events and all of this, banning of books. What has happened is that teachers are chilled out of teaching about current events. You can't even teach about the elections. How do you teach civics if you can't actually teach about current events?
Yeah, and then this comes back to where we started, though, with these maniac moms for misery groups who are out there, trying to armchair teach.
Exactly. So you can't. So when somebody says the kids don't know the separation of powers, it's not about memorization of, this is the presidency and this is the Congress and this is the Supreme Court. How are you going to know about the Supreme Court if you can't actually teach, what happened in the Dobbs decision in high school, how or what happens in any other decision? And so what's happened is that these groups are speaking out of both sides of their mouth. This civics is not about memorization. Civics is about application. And you have to teach kids how to think, which means that controversial topics sometimes, things that are conflictual, you have to teach. And they don't want us to do that. And that's, so you can't say to a teacher, don't teach a divisive concept. Slavery is a divisive concept. Don't teach a divisive concept and then complain later on that we're not teaching civics. Come on.
Yeah. Lastly, before I let you go, obviously, as you brought up earlier, today was the funeral of former First Lady Rosalyn Carter. Any thoughts on her passing, on her life? Any thoughts?
Oh, look, today was, what obviously was not there, but in watching the pictures and in listening to the speeches, the fact that all those first ladies were there, everyone who's alive was there, was an amazing tribute to her, including, I was glad to see Melania Trump there. It was just an amazing tribute. And first ladies play a really important role in this country. And you see that with the role that Joe Biden is playing. They are helping heal the soul of the country. And Rosalyn Carter was a first lady extraordinaire, and she really worked to ensure deep humanism in this country. And I think I'm glad that she and President Carter have, over the last 2 decades or so, really gotten their due for the amazing patriots that they are.
Yeah, we need more Carters, most certainly. Randy, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick. Take care.
Randy Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers. I want to hear your thoughts. How are things in your school district? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Oh, I'm looking at the this article about Jonathan Last over at the Bulwark. And this is one of those things that gets me about some reporters. And look, I don't know Jonathan Last very well, but he's got this piece, about Chris Sununu, and it's titled "Chris Sununu and the Good Republicans' Noble Lie." And it's basically Sununu trying to play the role of the, as Last puts it, the certified good Republican. And look, he had some things that weren't overly glowing about Trump, and trying to play middle of the road, saying, hey, he's not going to be the nominee. That's not going to happen. And look, Trump was at 45% back then, and it's gotten worse. So now he's come out, and he is saying, well, he's weighed the options. He's done his research. Done his research, and now he's come up with I'm going to vote for Donald Trump. And here's the thing, and this is where my mind goes to this place, because Jonathan Last says there are only three explanations for this about face, for Sununu falling in the line, if you will. One, he's stupid. Two, underwent a genuine wholesale reevaluation, had just, he grew to love Donald, or Sununu was lying about what he really thought. And you go, well, yeah, and he's right. Look, three is probably the most plausible. But I never bought any of that from the beginning. And this is where you go, they've told us who they are. Why do we keep falling for it? Why do we keep being Lucy'd? Lucy pulls the football away every time. There is no scenario where Charlie Brown gets to kick the ball. Doesn't happen. But here we are again in this moment, where I guess it is what it is. And I guess, are we surprised by it? The answer, not so much. Got about a minute to go. We got Ronathan on line 1 from Cincinnati. Ronathan, how are you?
Hey, how are you doing, sir?
I'm good. What's on your mind, brother? Quick.
Well, just real quick, I wanted to say I'm a longtime viewer, and you're a real sexy man. I'd lift up my...
Thank you, Ronathan. I always like a good compliment. That hasn't happened in a while. Thank you so much. I appreciate. I'm always willing to take a compliment when one is thrown my way. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
We must reverse course.
UN Secretary General warns world is far off track to avoid catastrophic warming. Annual UN climate conference COP28 gets underway in oil-rich Dubai. Plus, International Energy Agency warns fossil fuel industry faces a reckoning.
All of those reckonings and more straight ahead from BrandBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
We're simply inflating the lifeboats while breaking the horse.
Breaking the horse?
Oars. He was talking about oars. Lifeboat, oars.
Well, at least we're not breaking the horse. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, no wonder they never get anything done at these climate conferences. Nobody can understand what the UN Secretary General is actually saying.
Well, not true. Most people understand.
Sure. Well, we're back. What do you got for us today?
Well, first, while we were out, a global temperature milestone. On Friday, November 17, for the first time since record-keeping began in the mid-1800s, the planet's average air temperature hit 2 degrees Celsius warmer than pre-industrial levels. That's according to Europe's climate service. It's an indicator of just how quickly the planet is warming. But climate scientists say we have not passed the 2 degrees Celsius target in the Paris Climate Agreement, which is defined by staying above 2 degrees Celsius for many years on end.
So we went above 2 degrees, but just for a day, so there's still time to roll it all back.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Currently, humanity's use of fossil fuels has warmed the planet 1.2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. But that is little comfort. The United Nations 2023 Emissions Gap Report covers the gap between countries' pledges to cut their fossil fuel emissions versus what's actually required to meet the Paris targets. If every country achieves their targets, the planet is on track to heat up by nearly 3 degrees Celsius by the end of this century.
That's if they meet the targets?
Yes. Scientists say warming on that scale would push planetary systems past a number of catastrophic tipping points, like the collapse of polar ice sheets and the potential shutdown of vital ocean currents.
I'm starting to think we're in big, big trouble.
A different report from the International Cryosphere Climate Initiative warns that global warming of 2 degrees Celsius would trigger catastrophic ice loss with, quote, extensive, long-term, and essentially irreversible melting of Earth's ice sheets and glaciers, and would acidify the polar oceans.
Who's that from?
The International Cryosphere Climate Initiative.
Emphasis on cry.
So it matters that the United Nations Climate Change Conference begins in Dubai this week. Called COP28 for short, the massive conference of parties will hammer out key mechanisms for implementing the Paris Climate Agreement. COP28 is already one of the most controversial climate summits because it's hosted by the United Arab Emirates and the president of its state oil company. He has said that reducing fossil fuels is, quote, inevitable, but on Monday, the BBC revealed leaked internal documents showing the UAE plans to use the climate conference to privately pitch new oil and gas developments to foreign governments.
Who would have thought holding a climate conference in a petrostate would have such results?
It's expected to be a contentious conference. Multiple countries want clear language calling for a phase out of fossil fuels versus the fossil fuel industry's push for a phase down, accompanied by costly carbon capture of their climate warming emissions.
Which doesn't work.
Yeah, critics say that would allow the oil and gas industry to continue polluting indefinitely. And a new international agency report warned the fossil fuel industry to drop carbon capture technology as, quote, an illusion that will require inconceivable amounts of energy. The report found the oil and gas industry invests only 1% of its capital in clean energy, despite $3 trillion in average annual revenue. The IEA says there are only two options left for oil and gas companies: transition or disappear. Other goals at the conference include reaching an agreement on implementation of the Loss and Damage Fund, in which rich countries, primarily responsible for causing the climate crisis, provide funding and assistance to developing countries already bearing the brunt of extreme weather disasters. Also, reaching an agreement to triple global renewable electricity capacity by 2030. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres said leaders at COP28 must, quote, plot a course for ending fossil fuels with a time limit compatible with the Paris Agreement.
The emissions gap is more like an emissions canyon, a canyon littered with broken promises, broken lives, and broken records. Leaders must drastically up their game now with record ambition, record action, and record emissions reductions. Leaders can kick the can any further. We are out of road.
Out of road, out of time, out of luck.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I talk a lot about workers' rights and the idea of organizing for better wages, hours, conditions. I say that quite often, but also throw in their opportunities. And I've been saying that the old frame of wages, hours, conditions, that just rolls off the tongue. But I throw more in that because I think we're in a moment right now where organized labor needs to be that fighting force that creates that opportunity for working people, be it through education, be it through healthcare, be it through where you live. Can you afford a house? And the question that has come up is affordable housing the new battlefront for workers' rights? And here to help answer that question is the reporter who asked the question, wrote the article for our good folks over at Capitol in Maine, Vanessa Wong. Vanessa, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, this is a topic that, I've talked about, for some time. This idea, wages, hours, conditions, certainly, but opportunities and housing being a huge part of that because we're being priced out of being able to buy homes. And it's gotten to the point now where you have these huge hedge funds who are buying up all the rentals. We can't rent homes anymore. So where do we live? And I love the fact that this is now a workers' rights issue.
Yeah, I mean, it was really surprising to me. I spoke with unions around the country who are advocating for affordable housing, either at the bargaining table or outside of the bargaining table. So they're using their platform to either negotiate with their employers for, I mean, wages is one thing, right? But to specifically ask for affordable housing solutions as part of their contract, and also using their platform to do some political advocacy to push for regulation of the housing market so that all of the progress that they make with their contracts and wages aren't immediately eroded by increases in housing prices, which is what we've seen for, at least
decades.
Decades. I mean, it's in my adult life, that's been the story of the economy. You get a raise and your housing costs. I live in New York City. Your rent goes up, at least whatever your raise was. These days, inflation is eating into people's earnings so much. So it just really feels like no matter how much your wages go up, through the work of the hard work of a lot of union negotiation, there's sort of like no progress in anyone's quality of life. And I think that's why I have seen so many surveys recently about people feeling kind of gloomy about it.
Yeah, no, just yesterday we talked about the Wall Street Journal survey that said, people don't believe that the American dream is possible. That phrase that I grew up believing, if you work hard, you play by the rules, that you get ahead. And sadly, that's not happening. And, the first time I saw this be, the housing issue be part of a union contract fight, I think it was with Google, I think, if I'm not mistaken, where the bus drivers and folks were like, hey, we have to sleep in the buses. We have nowhere to live. We can't live in San Francisco on the pittance that we're being paid here. And this is, for me, I look at this as a moment for opportunity for policymakers to get involved and to do something. And I think back to, my grandparents' generation. When my grandfather came back from World War II, we had a policy in this country to build, good, solid, low-cost housing for those soldiers and their families to live in. We planned Levitt towns all across this country. I don't know why we're not doing that right now, given the fact that housing is so completely outpriced and hedge funds are buying up all the rentals.
Right. I mean, yeah, it was very interesting to learn about the history of union work on affordable housing issues. In New York City, there was a lot of union-developed affordable housing actually in the earlier part of the 20th century. Back then, there were union banks that were able to, provide financing for these projects. There was a lot of political interest in this issue, largely as a result of, I think, like housing quality. I think in New York City, there was a big push to build quality housing for people where living conditions weren't good for many. And we saw many thousands of units of affordable housing built over, that early part of the 20th century. And it later just became something that the government and the private market took over afterwards. And I think we've seen where that's gone.
This is where I completely agree with the idea of a public-private partnership. sadly, what's happened, my grandparents' era public-private partnership was we use public money to get private firms to do things in the public's interest that benefit we the people. What that has morphed into is we use public dollars to enrich private interests for the goal of enriching private interests. And then we the people, we the working folks, we just get stiffed.
That's right. I mean, it was interesting to talk with, Local 26 out in Minnesota about how they, one of the main issues they have with some of these partnerships, the way that their local government is dealing with affordable housing is flawed because the definition of what's affordable is really out of reach for the typical working class person these days. I think in many markets, there's a federal definition. I think it's adopted in a lot of programs of, 30%,
Right.
As long as your income is your housing cost is about 30% of your income. That's the threshold for what's considered affordable. But it's really not. I mean, that's, just having a standard like that doesn't really make sense across the board. 30% of, minimum wage income is really different than 30% of an upper middle class income or, a wealthy person's income. So I just think that, there needs to be more thought about what's going on with a lot of the affordable housing programs that local governments are putting in place because they're not working.
No, this is,
in fact, at this point that it's not working.
Yeah, in fact, I was just having this conversation today with one of the station managers, one of our affiliates, and he was saying, I got this great idea on how we can solve all these problems. And granted, it was something that I had talked about years ago, and we'd gone through. But you go into some of these major cities where you have blight, and you have abandoned factories, and you have all this stuff, and you just bulldoze all of that and start building from scratch. Give people jobs, invest in those communities, give people local ownership to where they can start to build some wealth. We could recreate that prosperous working class of the 50s and 60s if we chose to. The problem is policymakers haven't chosen to do this. We've chosen to give tax breaks to rich people so that they can hoard more and control more instead of making sure that, my kids have an opportunity to do at least as well as I've done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, there was an interesting pilot program. I shouldn't even call it a pilot program, but there was an interesting partnership that the AFT did out in West Virginia, where they developed about 20 units of workforce housing for teachers as part of an economic development program. I think what that city found was that a lot of teachers, weren't coming to teach at the schools because housing was an issue.
Right.
And it was a challenge. That program was a challenge. I mean, I think it was hard to find funding for something like that. And what Randy Weingarten was telling me was that, what happens is you can't, if you're trying to build affordable housing, right now it's really hard because whatever the costs are, you can't push onto the teachers that you're trying to build affordable housing for, right? So like the funding is a really critical issue that I think needs to be dealt with because if, there's no unions can't really be the financier of last resort for affordable.
No, this is where government has to step in and do this. This is where having higher tax rates on rich people and redistributive policies to ensure that we do have a floor under working people's feet. I ask the question all the time, Vanessa, what good's an economy if a large percentage of our people are struggling just for the basic necessities, and government should be that vehicle that ensures that everyone has at least that opportunity to work hard, play by the rules, and yes, get ahead.
Yeah. I mean, this is an issue. Affordable housing is an issue that's come up on local ballots for years now. I don't know how it's not everyone's top issue at this point. I mean, the median, the average renter in the U.S. is paying about 30% of their rent for housing right now. That means the average renter, just like your average renter, not even in, a big coastal city, is housing cost burden at this point. This is a major political issue. I don't think that, the market alone is going to deal with it. So I'm just surprised that it hasn't become a bigger issue for,
That's because we don't have a mainstream corporate controlled media who finds this interesting. This is taking from their bottom line. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Vanessa Wong. She's a reporter. She wrote this most recent piece, Is Affordable Housing a New Worker's Right? You can check that out over at Capital in Maine. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that. And look, I go back to, I think this is something that you're right. I don't know why it isn't something that people are upset about and angry about. I think it has to do with, I'm okay, I'm getting by, somebody else might get something that I'm not, because that's how we destroy things. That's how we pit people against each other in this country. Someone might get something you don't get, Vanessa, so we can't have that, can we?
Right. But, healthcare is such a big political issue right now. It just seems to me that, in terms of, the share of anyone's wallet, every single month, what are you spending your money on? Housing is gigantic, so we'll see. Until then, I guess the unions will continue to sort of drum up some noise about how this issue is impacting their members, because I think that over and over again I just heard that they can't make progress for their members if all of their improvements are just going to go towards a landlord.
No, just provisions. Your housing, your food, your health insurance. What good is a raise if all of it just gets evaporated and you're paying rich people just to exist? Look, we have folks from the patriotic millionaires all the time, and the guy goes, "I get rich by you making your payments." And he's not wrong. And this is, again, where I come back to, if we had a true free market where, the capitalist principles work, there would be some industrious contractors out there going, hey, there's a market for the kind of homes that my grandparents' generation built. Look, the little bungalows, about 1,100 square feet, solid homes that are going to last for another 100 years probably. But we're cheap. Helped raise families. My grandparents paid, I think, 15, 16 grand in the mid 60s. And by the middle 70s, their mortgage was a day's pay. That's never going to happen in our lifetimes. And it's because that it was heavily subsidized on the front end, and because of the stagflation of the 70s, their raises went up because they had strong unions to say, hey, we're not going to allow your standard of living to go down because inflation has eroded it. 75, I think my grandfather got 3 raises because of the COLA in his contract. That's what we need to be talking about in this day and age.
Right. Oh my goodness. If only we could all just build a time machine and go back to the 60s. What a dream.
Well, no, we hadn't been sold on outrage media. We hadn't been sold on hooray for me. I'm the individual and the heck with everybody else. We hadn't been sold on the things that I grew up with, the one who dies with the most toys wins. That kind of mentality. Greed is good. They didn't think that way to the extreme. Now, granted, they were greedy, and granted, they wanted stuff, but they had an economy that was based on, hey, how do we help people? And I think we need to be talking about going back to that. And maybe we need another Great Depression. Maybe we need another painful event like they went through. I don't know. But we need to be talking about the policies that made that generation the most prosperous working class in history.
Yeah, I feel like we've been through so many painful events, maybe not to at the same level of intensity as the Great Depression, but I don't know, so little progress has come out of any of it. And I do feel sometimes 2023 at this point is just a worse version of 2019. In other words, the pandemic, I don't feel that the pandemic has any long-term improvement on the situation of Americans, right? So no. It's just astounding to me that we all experience this, unprecedented, I think that was the word that was repeated over and over again through the first year of COVID, unprecedented event. And we decided to just sort of go back to the way things were before, but just a little bit worse.
Just worse. And that's the thing that gets me, Vanessa. I've said the same thing, that, we came out of this event, and instead of going, hey, we need to pull together, we need to work less, we need to love more, we need to spend more time with family, we need to do the better things in life. No, we went right back to let's rip each other to shreds. I say all the time, we should be fighting for things that make our lives better instead of fighting over stuff that tears us apart and is nonsense.
Yep, absolutely.
So last question I've got for you, because, clearly something needs to be done. I'm sure you see the same reports that I see, that hedge funds are buying up, all the rental properties. You've got, athletes who've got 100,000 homes that they're renting out to people. How do we push policymakers to move in a direction? I know you didn't really go into this into the article, but is there any thoughts of maybe how we come back together, how we push for something like this, or is it really just hopeless?
Oh my goodness. I mean, I hope it's not hopeless, but I think that I think we've seen people start to mobilize around this, right? The unions are mobilizing. I think we've seen it on ballots. There were rent strikes through the pandemic. It's just, there's a lot of different things going on. It's just not clear to me yet what it's all going to add up to. It's no mystery right now that housing's not affordable. Like, I just don't think anybody can really make the case that things are okay the way they are. But I think there needs to be more clarity and more, I guess, a more collective understanding that this is an issue that needs to be addressed urgently.
Yeah. No, again, the failure of our policymakers is sometimes stunning to me. But I look at the system that we have is meant to be this kind of chaos where nothing really gets done, and the status quo is really great for the wealthy. Because they can continue to rob us blind. But excellent piece. I hope folks will take a look at it. The article is Affordable Housing, a New Worker's Right, written by Vanessa Wong. We'll get links out on how you can check the article out over at Cap in Maine. Vanessa, I appreciate you taking time for it. Love to have you back again soon.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Thanks so much. I want to hear your thoughts. Is this where we should be battling? Is this something we should be fighting for? Want to hear it? Rick at thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back with your thoughts. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
It really is quite remarkable when you stop and think about it. The fact that you go back to the end of World War II and the policies that came out. The idea that we were going to use tax dollars to build communities for people to live in, that we built swimming pools and parks, and we built all kinds of things that were for the good of we the people. We built the commons. Wasn't for profit, wasn't for special interest. It was for people to lead lives, to raise families. Now you could go, well, but Rick, and there's always the caveats. It wasn't this way for everybody, and absolutely, I'm with you. We can learn from that era, and we can make right the things that weren't righted. And there's part of me goes, that's kind of the reason that I don't think we get these things done. We could be building, the same kind of communities that my grandparents grew up in. In fact, I was talking to one of the station managers today of one of our affiliates, and he said, like Baltimore. He goes, you go into parts of Baltimore and it's all blight, it's all abandoned buildings, it's all problems, it's all chaos. Why can't we take the money that we've allocated to do certain programs in those areas and just tear it all down? Tear those blighted, dilapidated buildings down and build new housing that gives people jobs in those communities to build those houses so that they have ownership of it. And it's not that you have, some slumlord who then owns this new development. No, you get the people to build their communities. You give them jobs. You create that economy right there. And then, when you build it, they will come. And it's not a bad idea. It's something that I've talked about before. You go into places, people need jobs. All I hear from my conservative friends is, you go into Baltimore, you go into Chicago, and it's nothing but crime. It's the murder capitals of the world. You go, no, not all places. You go into any city across this country, I'm sure you're going to find trouble. And those, oddly enough, are places where you have high poverty. How about we address that by creating jobs? I have never been a handout guy. I've never been someone who believes that, we just give money out. I believe in jobs. I believe in union jobs. And I also believe that government should be the employer of last resort. If private corporations won't, they say they can't, but I say they won't create enough jobs for everyone, the private sector has to. Because I do believe there's dignity in work. I do believe there are people who need jobs. Instead of what we've been doing, which is creating an economy where the handful do very well and, the working folks get stiffed. And housing has been one of those areas. Look, my wife and I were just talking about this today. We're, talking about, what we're going to do when we retire a number of years down the road, what we're going to do with our house and, can we move and all this stuff. And I'm going, our mortgage rates are cheap right now. We'd be stupid to move. Because other houses that you're going to have to buy, it's crazy. Now, is there going to be a correction? Sure, there's going to be a correction down the road. But I think that only comes when you start saying, hey, we do need to build more housing, especially on the lower end. I don't know who can afford these $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 homes. I don't know. Especially in places that aren't major cities. But I had someone, in California tell me that, $1 million is the cost of a home in a lot of places. And I'm going, who can afford that? What working person can afford that? And the sad reality is, as was pointed out to me, this is how you end up having multiple generations living in the same home. This is how you have, these other scenarios. And I think we can do better. I think as working people, as voters, as citizens, shouldn't we be demanding better out of our legislatures? And what are we getting out of the Republicans in Congress? Because here's the thing, if I suggest this to a conservative, a Republican, one of the red hats, they're going to scream socialism without thinking about the fact that this is stuff that we did to build the prosperity of a generation. My grandparents, when they got married, and they got married for the old-fashioned reason. They had to. In fact, my aunt was, I think, born 4 months into the wedding, because the first one always comes whenever. Everyone after that's 9 months. But they were homeless. They were literally living in their car. And throughout their lives just my grandfather working for, a good 10, 12 years, they were able to buy a couple of homes. They were able to live with dignity and respect. They were able to have a pension and Social Security and savings, and they led a dignified life. Most working people, they're not looking to make a killing. They don't want to be Jeff Bezos, but they do want to make a living. And they want to have, as the old bread and roses, bread, yes, but roses too. Just my thoughts.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1908. That was the day that an explosion at the coal mine in Mariana in Washington County, Pennsylvania, claimed the lives of 154 miners. It was one of the deadliest disasters in U.S. mining history. The Mariana mine was on the Pittsburgh coal seam, one of the richest coal deposits in the country. The mine was operated by the Pittsburgh Buffalo Coal Company. It was considered by many to be a model operation. The company houses that surrounded the mine were made of yellow brick, had hot and cold running water, and electric lights. This set them apart from other mining homes of the day. By the early 1920s, 90% of all mining homes were wood-framed and less than 20% had electricity. Yet even though Mariana was considered a model, disaster still struck. Mine Inspector Harry Lewitt had been on site for 2 days leading up to the disaster. On Saturday morning, he had just left a mine shaft. According to newspaper reports, he found the mine in, quote, perfect condition. Then, shortly after 11 a.m., came a horrific explosion that left experts puzzled. It was believed that a vein of natural gas caused the deadly blast. Only one man, Fred Ellinger, was rescued from the mine. He gave a harrowing account of what happened to the Washington Observer. He said, quote, I was working at laying brick in one of the entries, and the first thing I knew, a terrible explosion took place, which threw me some distance. My 2 buddies were also tossed some distance away. I heard them for a while, then all was quiet. Ellinger was rescued, but 154 other men were not.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
Growing up, I absorbed a lot of values from my old Texas daddy. A strong commitment to the common good, a healthy work ethic, and a lively sense of humor. But one thing about him I've rejected: his determination to have a perfect yard of thick, verdant St. Augustine grass. Lord, how he worked at it. Laying sod, watering, fertilizing, watering, weeding, watering, spreading pesticides, watering, mowing, more watering. But it was too hot, too dry, too infested with blight, bugs, slugs, and such. He was up against Texas nature, and he just couldn't win. So I've gone in the opposite direction, slowly nurturing a natural yard of native trees, drought-tolerant plants, and a general live-with-nature ethic in my little landscape. I'm hardly alone in this rejection of the uniform green grass imperative. A spontaneous yard rebellion is taking hold across our country as more and more households, neighborhoods, businesses, etc. shift to a nature-friendly approach. A particularly encouraging push for change is coming from school kids, elementary level through college, who are appalled by the poisoning of our globe and organizing locally to do something that both makes a difference and makes a statement. One exemplary channel for their activism is a student movement called Rewild Your Campus. Of course, some people consider wild yards to be scruffy, ugly, unruly. That's their choice, but some also insist that tidy grass lawns must be everyone's choice. So they proclaim themselves to be the yard police, demanding that cities and homeowner associations make green grass uniformity the law. They file busybody lawsuits and run right-wing social media campaigns targeting people and groups that disobey. This is Jim Hightower saying, these attacks are silly because they are silly, and also because they're attacking the future. To work for yard sanity and choice, go to rewild.org.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, I gotta tell you, I'm already looking forward to next Thanksgiving because the turkey and all that stuff was so great. My wife is an incredible cook and always does really, really good stuff on Thanksgiving. But I also love Black Friday. Black Friday was always a day of activism. For years, I was out at the Walmart, doing the Black Friday picketing out there years ago. And now it's all about the Amazon. And you saw a number of actions across the country and across the globe on Black Friday around Amazon and organizing workers in those places. And here to share some thoughts on, how the actions went on Black Friday and, maybe what's in store for the coming year. I've asked Randy Corrigan to come talk with us. Randy is the principal officer and secretary-treasurer of Teamsters Local 1932 out on the West Coast. Randy, thanks for taking time for us.
Anytime, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
So let's talk about Black Friday. Again, Black Friday has become a day of labor activism. In fact, we've seen a lot of places who are saying, we're not going to have our people working on Black Friday. We'll have these online deals. So the pressure is working in some places. But what's going on at Amazon?
Well, as you can see, I'm sure everybody's been paying attention to the activism all over the world, not just the country. You have locations as far away as the UK, Australia, a number of places that not just you had actions, you had activity on the floor within the operations, and you obviously had strikes. You had extension of pickets. You had workers walk off the job in a number of areas. North Carolina, the United Kingdom, New Jersey, Georgia, Los Angeles, San Bernardino, Mariloma, literally all over the place. Workers are just basically taking direct action, and I think the rap on Amazon is everyone's kind of figuring it out. It's getting more and more obvious. It's getting, and it's funny to see their response all the time. We create great jobs, and we're great to these communities. And I guess if they keep saying it, they can believe their own BS. And if they create such great jobs, why do they have such crazy turnover? If the job is so great, why is there 150% turnover in less than a year?
No, and look, I say this all the time. I worked for a company called Roadway Express for 20 years. And one of the things that they used to talk about is they were very proud to have a unionized workforce because they had a 2% turnover rate. And they said, look, people come here, they make careers here, they stay here, we train them, they're the best trained workers in the workforce, and they were proud of that. The fact that you have a major corporation in this country who has 150% turnover, that's a failure. That's what a failure looks like, Randy.
Yeah, the days of an employer saying, come to work for me, you can come to work here, we're going to pay you the best, you're going to be able to retire here, we have the best retirement program, the best health care plans, we have, basically they would tout themselves as the best employer, and you can ultimately work they wanted to get somebody at 18, 19, 20 years old, as soon as they entered the workforce, and keep them as long as possible. That is the complete opposite of Amazon's business model. And what I love seeing is these workers that are taking direct action all over the country. You see them, it's their face on the picket line. It's not mine. I'm the director of division. I have a little bit to do with some of these actions all over the country. But we're making sure that those workers are the face of it. Those workers are explaining their reason for taking direct action. Those workers are telling the general public why they're taking on this business model and why this business model is so destructive. It's funny to see Amazon even claim they're great to small business. They're crushing small business. It's one of those things, you keep saying it, I guess you'll believe it. I'd love to see how maybe they're great for some small businesses, but I can point to many, many of them that they're crushing every single day. Well, small businesses aren't around to point it out.
Yeah, they're good for small businesses in that they put them out of business quickly. It's like they kill them quickly. They don't let them linger long term.
Yeah, there's not a lot of misery.
Right, it's quick. Because look, they are this behemoth that is dominating this market right now. And if legislatively we're not going to do anything, it's got to be the working people who stand up and take and are empowered to do what they're doing. And this is why I do have some faith. I think we're in a moment right now where people have finally said, enough is enough, and are taking some empowerment, are taking some actions. One of the things that I've talked about for years is, when people go, well, the union, I go, no, not the union, your union, our union, not your, our. Engage with it, own it. And I think this generation's kind of grabbing onto that, or do you disagree?
I totally agree. More than 70% of workers in America support unions. The younger generation supports it over 80%. And it's because of these very things that you're talking about. You mentioned something I got to comment on. Legislatively, are they going to be able to deal with it? No. Like even if they create some policy, it doesn't do any good unless the workers took direct action to create the policy. The reality is everything in this country that has value for workers has got to be driven by workers that took action to demand a policy change in conjunction with it, not that a bunch of people sitting around think what's best for these workers. Workers at Amazon are taking action, and it is growing by the day. Last year, there was a little bit of activity. Throughout the year, You're seeing ongoing activities. You're seeing extension of pickets. You're seeing workers walk off the job. We're seeing hundreds of workers almost weekly walk off the job over and over and over again. Of course, Amazon's not gonna talk about it. You know, you can't keep a lot of press on this all the time. That's okay. We're not looking to. Everybody's not looking to change the world in a minute. The reality is as time goes on, more and more workers are realizing the place in which they're going to have control and power is worker power. As you put it, their union, they're going to take control of these situations. And at the end of the day, they're going to say, hey, Amazon, you need to do a little bit better with your business model. This business model is trash. It is junk.
Yeah, no, I say all the time, it's about wages, hours, conditions, but also opportunities. And just, the last segment, we were talking with a reporter who wrote a piece on, asking the question, is affordable housing a worker's right? And, all of this stuff, comes back to empowering a generation of working people to use the tools at their disposal to make their lives better, whether it is their union or their government, to be pushing for policies. The hope is in both directions, like my grandparents' generation did. But at least we're beginning those organizing opportunities. We're bringing people together. That gives me hope for the future.
And the other place that it's happening, Rick, is it's happening at city councils. It's happening at county board of supervisor meetings. It's happening in municipal sort of settings where there's people are recognizing that their civic responsibility that quite frankly they abandoned for quite some time, that their civic responsibility, that platform is a space in which workers can demand those elected officials on a local level impact their everyday too. Like that, not everything is up to Congress. Not everything is up to the Senate. Not everything is up to the President of the United States. Matter of fact, that is where we have failed ourselves, is we put it into that space where it's got to be the NLRB or it's got to be the DOL or it's got to be some huge bureaucracy that takes forever to issue rulings. State agencies, state municipalities, local city government municipalities have the ability to have enforcement. They have the ability to deal with these things. And that's the other thing that we see happening. We see workers, residents, and community taking control of this, joining together on picket lines, saying enough is enough with this business model. Yeah, Amazon's huge. It's big. This stuff doesn't happen overnight. It takes one person at a time.
Yeah, as I say, you want to change the world, start by your little corner of it. And that's exactly what you're talking about here. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're with Randy Corrigan. Randy's the principal officer and secretary-treasurer of Teamsters Local 1932. Their website, teamsters1932.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can take a look at that and the work that they do. And if you're an Amazon worker and you want to find out more information on how to get involved, how to get active, how to maybe bring the union message to your little piece of the world, I'm sure Randy would be more than happy to help you. So you'll walk me through that. I mean, because clearly I know you're getting calls every day from people going, hey, I saw this. I want to make this better. Walk me through what that process looks like for an Amazon worker.
Well, let me back up to you asked a couple things. What's it look like? First of all, last week, 117 people said, hey, we need to deal with this, right? Like 117 came in. Like what's happened, there is literally thousands of workers that are reaching out. And, obviously it takes time. These are massive operations. You got to make sure that this stuff is coordinated in the right way. So what does it look like for somebody who's listening in and who's paying attention? First thing you got to do, you can reach out to the division. You can reach out to my website personally. It doesn't matter. We're going to funnel it all to the same space. And we're going to make sure wherever you're working in your particular region that you're working with all the community groups as well as the unions that are collectively taking this subject on, and everybody's working together. We're going to make sure that you're working together with the workers in that industry. In other words, you and UPSers and freight drivers and grocery workers, everybody that's kind of collectively in the same industry, that you're all collectively putting together a demand on the industry and putting a demand on Amazon to say, you need to bring things up to par. You need to have working conditions. You need to have pay, benefits, and a structure in which matches the industry so that there's somewhat of an industry standard. There's got to be a benchmark here. Can't keep eroding it. So what does that look like? First thing you got to do is you got to either pick up the phone, send an email, reach out to your local union. It does your local union, Teamster local union in the area. All of those things, we make sure that they're funneled into a common space, and we make sure all the appropriate people that are working on it in that particular region is advancing it. And sometimes people say, oh, well, it's not going to move fast enough. Sometimes it doesn't. It depends. How, you got some areas that got 5, 10, 20. You got 40,000 Amazon workers in the Inland Empire, another 50,000 in the LA base. You got even more in San Diego. So that's a big number in Southern California. Right? You can't move those types of people, with just a snap of the finger. You have to make sure everybody's on board. And the most important thing is, I think the thing that we have all missed, and I love that you say it all the time, Rick, is we got to make sure that the community is alongside with us on this. We got to make sure that community stakeholders, that elected officials and local elected officials and local community organizations are grounded in this work too. Because without that, it won't survive. That they being those community allies, have to partner up with these workers and demand that their community collectively expects more. That way it's not third party is what this union institution is asking. It's a community that's saying we deserve better.
No, and that we earn better. We create this wealth. And this is the part that, when I was doing organizing and talking to workers, it's like, look, you create the wealth for this company. You earn a portion of that. And, the question is you probably should be getting a lot more than you are. And you get that by organizing. And this is where I keep coming back to. Amazon is a massively profitable company. We're talking billions of dollars in money going into the hands of the few. The people who create that wealth, I think, earn a lot more than what they're getting. I think the president has talked about this as well, especially with the UAW folks. So last question I've got for you, because you're seeing these successes, the UAW with the big three, the Teamsters with UPS. You're seeing a lot of these contracts going.
Culinary.
Right.
Culinary.
Absolutely. That was incredible. We had folks on from that. What's the message going forward in getting people to go, hey, I can do that?
Well, part of it is seeing this activism of workers, right? And I think that looking and seeing they look like one another. They're obviously doing very similar work for one another. And there's a slight difference here. So your culinary, your UPS, and your UAW, those are all contract renewals, right? Which is very different than the space on Amazon.
Right.
The Amazon space is actually building it from the beginning, where
much
UAW,
like Starbucks.
UPS, yeah, those are all 100-year contracts, 50-year contracts, culinaries, 40-year contracts, right? So there's a system in place where you have automatic expiration. You got triggers and processes that make that take the next step automatically. We're talking about workers organizing on this scale. It is, there's things that aren't definitive. It's not like, well, the contract expires on the 30th of November, and if we don't get a deal, we're going to go on strike. Things aren't clearly written in that space, so they become a little less definitive. But workers actually have more opportunity to take control in that space once they understand worker power and they understand the rules. Unfortunately, workers in the last few decades have been basically convinced that this process is futile. That you just, companies own everything and it's up to them and you got to give up and just move on. And that goes back to our history of slavery and all that. It's another show we should have a long discussion on. But specifically, what's the message for today is that if these workers can do it, you can do it. And if you don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yep. Because
at some point, we got to do it. We've in the transportation industry, we have seen working conditions, wages and benefits plummet because they had a business model, not just Amazon, but what the predecessors of Amazon got away with: temporary workforce, contingent workforce, having everything subcontracted out. Every big employer and big corporation escaping their responsibility and dumping it on someone else. Well, what that led to was a degradation in wages, a degradation in benefits as a whole across the board. Now workers are saying, hey, this is good. These should be good jobs. These shouldn't be transitional jobs. These shouldn't be temporary jobs. And now you're seeing the elimination of temporary work. But workers have got to do more of this. There's not going to be a snap of the finger and go away. It's going to take a lot of years of this activism to push through and for literally millions of workers to push back. I know some people say that sounds crazy when I say that. It's not crazy, Rick. It absolutely has to happen because that is what workers did in the 1920s and 30s and 40s. They moved millions of workers doing exactly what we're talking about right now by taking action in their own hands, withholding their labor and saying, I want a union contract.
No, you're spot on. The old adage, if not you, who? If not now, when? Pretty simple. Randy, I appreciate the time. Love the passion. Hope folks will reach out. Teamsters1932.org. The website, Randy Corrigan, Secretary, Treasurer, Principal Officer there at Teamsters Local 1932. Appreciate the time, man. Thanks so much.
Anytime, man. Thanks for having me on.
Our good friend Randy Corrigan. Again, Teamsters1932.org, the website. Make sure you check that out. Quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1891. That was the day the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Union began in St. Louis, Missouri. At the time of the union's founding, the field of electrical work was very new. Linemen often risked their lives for their jobs. They worked on high power lines, sometimes as long as 12 hours a day. They worked in all sorts of weather, typically earning as little as 15 to 20 cents an hour. In 1890, an exposition was held in St. Louis to showcase a glorious display of electrical wonders. The exposition brought together electrical workers from throughout the United States. At the end of their work each day, the men would gather and talk. They shared stories of their hard work under dangerous and unsafe conditions. They decided it was time to form a union. They reached out to the American Federation of Labor. The AFL sent an organizer named Charles Castle to help them. Soon, local number 5221 of the Electrical Wiremen and Linemen's Union was established in St. Louis. But the men knew they had to reach beyond St. Louis. They elected lineman Harry Miller as their president. They then sent him traveling by railroad boxcar to cities like Indianapolis, Pittsburgh, New Orleans, and Milwaukee. Miller helped linemen in these cities organize their own local unions. Delegates from 10 locals, representing less than 300 members, gathered in St. Louis. It was there that they drafted a constitution and adopted a logo, the iconic image of a clenched fist holding 2 lightning bolts. And with that, the IBEW was born. Today, the union represents approximately 250,000 members and is a true spark for the labor movement.
Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Questions, comments, something on your mind, email me, rick at thericksmithshow.com. So, real quick, I want to let everyone know we're ticking down the days until we're turning off the live microphones and leaving the live radio space. We will be expanding our free speech TV offerings in the new year. We're going to be doing an hour every day. Still working on the time. I think they're talking about 5 o'clock in the afternoon for our TV show. That will be every day, Monday through Friday. We will be offering the audio to radio stations. So many of the affiliates that you're listening to us on right now are going to grab the hour. So we are not going to go away. We want to have some interactivity. We want people to continue to email and reach out to us, and we're hoping that this is a way forward. We're hoping that this is a way for us to expand our reach, engage with more people, and move into the newer technologies. The sad reality is a lot of people believe radio is dead. I don't. I believe radio is, while it may not be the future in 20, 30 years, I believe it is the now. And we most certainly do need to be engaging in this space. But truth be told, we've got to make our revenue fit our what we're doing to reach folks. So TV seems to be the best way forward for us. And I hope you'll check out freespeech.org. That is where we will be spending our time helping promote that. We're going to be doing a lot more social media and the podcast space. I had someone go, hey, Rick, are you still going to do long form interviews? And I said, we're going to do some of that stuff where we're going to, try and do, some in-depth interviews, but that'll be in the podcast space. So you'll want to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss a moment of what we do. And I got people who are, they subscribe, they listen religiously, and I'm thankful for those folks, grateful for the time that they give us. But yeah, that's where we're going. And as always, all this stuff will be at thericksmithshow.com. Ways to find us, ways to engage, ways to interact. That is our hope. So I'm looking forward to the new year, because I think this is going to be a great opportunity to expand our reach. Free speech is in at 80 million homes across the country, and with the streaming services that are out there, virtually no matter where you are, you can grab this. So the talk is we're going to take this hour and we're going to do the best hour on TV and ultimately on radio, and I'm looking forward to that. It's going to give us some real opportunities. But for all the folks who've been reaching out concerned that they're going to lose us, you're not going to lose us. TheRickSmithShow.com is always going to be there for you to reach out and find where we are. I want to finish off with Tommy Tuberville. Now, we talked about Tommy Tuberville the other day, and I believe that part of what he has done and part of the thinking was, if you hold up these promotions long enough in the military, you hold enough back that Trump becomes president, and then you can do what they did, what McConnell did with judges. Only Tuberville, not as smart as McConnell, didn't really think through the whole, hey, the optics not good. The optics are bad because you're supposed to be the party of the military. You're supposed to be the guys who, when you see somebody in your uniform, you run over there and take a selfie with them. You're there for the photo ops. But Tuberville said, he told his colleagues, I got you into this mess. I'm going to get you out. And he evidently went on, talking about the longstanding traditions of the Senate. Said it would be eroded if the Senate Democrats passed the resolution that would allow most of the military promotions to go forward. And I go, no, this is what a functional democracy looks like. When one person throws a temper tantrum, when one person has a fit, when one person is the fly in the ointment, the sand in the Vaseline, whatever you want to frame that is, when one guy's the a-hole, everybody else deals with him. And it's about time Schumer starts looking at dealing with the giant you-know-what. So we'll see where this goes. If you miss any portion of the program, grab the podcast. Always there, always available. I want to hear your thoughts. Something I said got under your skin, on your nerves. Or, hey, I want to join a union. I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.